You're watching Telecom TV from the second annual TIP Summit in Santa Clara in Silicon Valley. I'm joined now by Mansoor Hanif of BT. Mansoor, good to see you again on Telecom TV.
Good to see you.
Announcement that was made at the summit today was about the makeup of the TIP board, the Telecom Infra Project board. BT is now a board member. Why is BT throwing its weight behind TIP, and what does it see that TIP can bring to itself, and I guess also the broader telecoms community?
Well, yes, a very big announcement from our side, but I think overall for the whole industry, because Howard Watson, who's our CEO of Technology Service and Operations, has personally joined the board of directors. So unfortunately, he couldn't be here today because he was on a trip to India. But I know from personally speaking with him that he will be very much engaged directly. So it's very significant because, you know, Howard is probably the most senior member on the board today, because Howard runs all of the technology in BT Group. And he reports directly to Gavin Patterson, our CEO. So I think, first of all, it's a message of how seriously we take this opportunity. Secondly, if you look at the overall makeup of the board, and you have Vodafone getting on board, you have Telefonica, and you already had Deutsche Telekom there, and ourselves. You know, the operators really see this as something different, something unique. So I think that's going to raise a lot of eyebrows and show the momentum we have with TIP is not going away, it's going to increase. For BT itself, it's a slightly different approach than the other operators. So Telefonica, Deutsche Telekom, and other people who are involved in the TEECs like Orange, they've all got a lot of networks in emerging countries, mobile networks. So while BT has a global presence through global services, our mobile network is focused on the UK. So from our perspective, we have been focusing on the things that are really important to our customers in the UK. And you know, rural connectivity needs to be improved, we know that. Even though we've done a great job in rolling out our 4G network really to very remote areas, we can still do more. Indoor coverage, but also things like connectivity on trains, on automobiles, on trains, planes, anything that moves really, are areas that still require improvements. Those are the kind of areas that we're focusing on. The two other things that are coming along is convergence, fixed mobile convergence. So we're actively looking at areas in TIP that need a bit of a push from the operator community and the wider partnership community. Slicing is another area that we've just launched today, a new project group that we'll be chairing. And slicing is, we feel, a fundamental part of the transformational aspect of 5G that need a lot of work and a lot of collaboration, and TIP is the perfect place to do that.
You mentioned the project group there, the end-to-end network slicing project group, one of the new project groups that TIP's announced. There's a lot of talk in the industry about network slicing. There's been white papers, there's been some tests and various technology approaches to how we go about it. Why the need to create in a way, another group, another body looking at network slicing? What are we looking at within TIP that we're not seeing elsewhere?
Well, I think that you're absolutely right. There's a lot of talk, but talk doesn't get you anywhere, does it? So we've done a lot of trials, proof of concept. We've also done economic studies, for example, with the King's College and Ericsson. We've done showcases with Huawei and Nokia. But we feel that people are not taking the end-to-end aspect of network slicing seriously enough. My background is that I've been asked for slices for 10 years. Over 3G, over 4G, and now with 5G, I see the opportunity of industrializing it. So my background, the first time somebody asked me for a slice was actually in Orange in Moldova, when the broadcasters asked us to provide a quality of service providing 1 meg over a 3G network. And you know what? We could do it. It took a lot of effort to do it. It was quite difficult. But I saw, wow, people want to bring networks to a new level. Now, with emergency services, for example, being implemented over the 4G network of EE, obviously when I was running the RAN networks, it was a big part of what we were pushing for. That's now being implemented, and there's thousands of people working on that, making that a reality. But again, if we need to, in the future, make that scalable, we need to work with the industry to automate that. And without the end-to-end piece, the gains are simply not enough to justify the effort that it takes. So I think that if you're going to do something as difficult as virtualization, automation, making networks flexible, you might as well go the full whack and do everything that you need to do in one platform. And that's what we're trying to get moving with the end-to-end slicing, because I didn't think any of our partners could see the need of that end-to-end slicing coming earlier. Now it is there.
So network slicing's real, the concept of network slicing works, but are we looking at a large number of network slicing? Is it too simplistic to say automotive, that'll be a slice, broadcast, that'll be a slice? Are we talking multiple slices within all those verticals?
Yeah, and that's one of the things I spoke about today, is the fact that, number one, we don't want to limit the capabilities of slicing by standardizing perhaps every slice. That's not, you can do that for 1 or 2 slices, but it doesn't really bring us much further than where we are today. So as I said, we're doing slicing today for certain customers. Standardizing 3 or 4 more slices on top of that is great, but I don't think it's going to fundamentally change things. If we can have a way of identifying which customers need which slices and allowing them to be set up like virtual machines or containers in the hundreds or thousands, optimizing the infrastructure, that's a really big ambition to have. But it's doable if we start now, and I don't think it's going to be done tomorrow. But what we have with TIP is an open community where we can bring in existing and new players and connect labs around the world and show in a multi-vendor environment where we are today and what we need to be done over the next 3 years to get to that point where it can be scalable and multi-vendor.
Because BT's already involved at a high level in one of the TIP project groups, which is the vRAN front haul group, where BT is currently chairing that. What is BT hoping to, and TIP hoping to achieve from its look at the virtualized RAN for front haul?
Yeah, that's true. We are really pushing hard on the vRAN front haul project, and Richard McKinsey, who's in our research team, is chairing that. The co-chair is Vodafone, and I actually didn't realize until today when I saw the numbers how many people have joined up to that. I don't know if you heard it, but 17 operators, 189 people are working on that project. We have 4 connected labs around the world and about 9 use cases, and each of the connected labs is looking at some specific use cases within that group. And really, where else can you find that? It's amazing. So from the BT perspective, the use case that we're looking at is looking at front haul in the case where you don't have ideal front haul capacity. So for example, in an in-building situation, when you want to do multi-host with the highest technologies on front haul, normally you'd need some really serious bandwidth to do that in a building environment. Now we think with the compression technologies that we're testing out with vRAN, that we can get that down to using existing infrastructure and still have that flexibility and capability to provision remotely for any type of situation. So that's one area. Another area is in the remote rural areas when you want to do multi-host, using G.fast for backhaul, for example. So those kind of the areas that we're looking at in vRAN. What's really interesting though is we're thinking of bringing it to one step further, where you might be well aware of the front haul wars, as you call it, where you've got eCPRI coming out, you got NGFI coming out, you got XRAN coming out, and you got various splits. And what we'd like to do is have a look and see, could we actually use this project to actually decide together with the ecosystem what's open and what's not? Why should we tell the ecosystem, actually, this is an open interface, that's not? That's what's happened in the past. And we all had issues with ABIS, we all had issues with CPRI. Now what I'd like to say is, okay, we have all these versions, let's spread them out on these 4 or 5 connected labs, and then ecosystem telling us, well, actually, we can actually produce products based on this interface, or we can't. And then that way, the ecosystem has finally got a voice to tell us what's really open, rather than it coming from certain vendors saying this is open, this is not. So that's where we'd like to bring TIP, and where TIP can be really effective, and still work with the standards organization.
Which I guess a lot of people are not skeptical, but a bit maybe cautious, thinking, well, is TIP going to replace some of these organizations, some of these industry groups, some of these open bodies? Because our industry can't afford to send all its engineers to all the different groups and all the different bodies. There's got to be some kind of give and take here a bit.
No, of course. Certainly, we're not going to replace the key standards groups, but we're going to complement it, and we're going to feed into them. and accelerate them by actually having these connected labs where people can come in and work in an open environment. And I think what's really important with standardization, as with anything, any rules or any process, is to know when to standardize, or what to standardize, and what not to standardize. Because sometimes it can be counterproductive if you try and standardize too much, because you're actually blocking innovation in some cases. So there's a delicate balance there, and I think things like TIP are areas that can help us to understand where it's best to have the standardization and where not. Now obviously in mobile networks we need interoperability, and it's been a huge success through standardization that we've achieved that, so we don't want to lose that at all. But again, sometimes going into perhaps standardizing too much, like in the CPRI, you've actually locked out new innovators than actually allowing them in, which shouldn't be the scope of standardization. And the same is true for network slicing, which we just discussed previously. So we've got a limited amount of people who know networks inside out today. Now we want to grow that, which means we've got to be selective of what we get involved in. And many times we say no to things that we'd like to, but you can see from the input we're putting into TIP that we believe this is one of the fundamental things that is useful. One thing I'd like to add is, if you look at, for example, network slicing, okay, so you don't want to have to standardize every single slice, because that would be impossible. But a radio manufacturer or a microwave manufacturer who's part of the slicing, they need to know what are the fundamental parameters and resources that they should be offering up to a slice. So how do we actually get that across when you've got many, many different types of network elements across a slice? Is that a standard situation? No, it's not. Is that a GSMA association system? We don't think it is. We think it's more about working on real use cases with the ecosystem, so it becomes pretty much clear to everybody what are the fundamental resources we expect to be offered up to slicing. Then how you actually implement the orchestration and the slicing around that is something that should be open to everybody in the standards organization.
Great. Well, Mansoor, as always, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome. Thank you.